All right, I think we can get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Luke Dumont. I'm Senior Vice President of Insights in the Central Canada Division of Leger. I'm joined today by my colleague, Tracy Birkenbush from our US office. Hello, Tracy.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Yeah, we're very excited to be presenting the brand momentum study to you all today. Um, just a quick reminder, we will be sending out an email after this session, which will contain links to both a recording of the session and to the deck that we're presenting here today. The chat is disabled for this session, but please post your questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to them at the end of the session, depending on time. And I'm sure we will have time. We'll try to make sure that we have time for that. So let's start with a little bit of the history of brand momentum. This study has been in the making at Leger for quite a few years. It was developed according to the kinds of things we were hearing from our clients in terms of what their needs were, in terms of understanding their brand beyond their point in time brand health measurement type of study. The offering was developed by the North American CPG research team, which is Tracy's teams, my teams, our teams in Montreal, in Western Canada, as well as with our internal advanced analytics team, Leger Analytics, which we call LEA. So just in terms of the flow, first we'll take you through the brand momentum model, and then we've conducted 2 case studies in the US to bring the model to life, because it's really important to see it in action. Talking about a model can be a little hard to comprehend what it will provide you as a brand manager or a brand owner. One of the categories we'll be talking about is laundry detergent, and the other is dog food and treats. So why is measuring your brand's momentum important? Well, as I said before, the focus of this study and the rationale behind creating it was we wanted to give our clients a better way of understanding the dynamics of the category that they operate in. So not only where's your brand today, but where is it going tomorrow? And also, more importantly, in relation to other brands in the category, either legacy brands or even emerging or just like new entrants to the brand, and keeping track of those things. So the brand momentum study will give you a pretty comprehensive measure of your brand's strength and vitality, which we've determined are 2 key aspects of better understanding your current performance and your future consumers' behavior. It's really something that we're noticing is helpful at helping you decide where to focus your resources and marketing strategies. Because it's really not just about how your current customers see you. It's also about reaching those who have a positive view of you, of your product, but haven't tried it yet. So, with those who are already your customer, how do you keep them loyal, right? And the brand momentum does help with that. And when it comes to those customers that understanding what needs to be done to get them on board, because you do have people who view you positively, but may not be engaged with your brand from a purchasing perspective. So the brand momentum will help you understand that as well, and give you tools and tips and strategies on how to achieve that. And as I've mentioned already, it gives you a very good view of your market's dynamics, your category dynamics, so that you can stay ahead of competitors through innovation or responding to some of the changes in the category. Now, this can be used for tracking. It can be done once a year. We typically recommend a couple of times a year for your product or products, because innovation, as we all know, happens very quickly, and identifying those areas for growth really helps your brand remain relevant and provide you with what's required for long-term success. So what exactly is the brand momentum study? So it's a couple of things that are really important. It's a lot of things, but it's important to note that it is a customized study. It's been pressure tested, as we like to say, really, again, focused on the brand's vitality and its strength. It can be customized to your category, basically to multiple brands within the same category or even across categories. Some brands like to compare themselves against other brands because they like what they're doing, or they're hearing that they're doing certain things in terms of marketing and or how they're perceived, and they want to understand how they compare to those brands. There are a couple of versions of this model. The model we're presenting today is specifically designed for consumer goods brands, and it's really, as I said, it's a proven approach. It's been stress tested for years across multiple categories. I think we have well over 200 brands that we've measured and used to validate our findings. And of course, there have been a lot of academic papers involved as well in terms of understanding consumer behavior and coming up with those key drivers or key pillars of behavior in this space. I've mentioned already that this can be used as a continuous tracking tool, so that you can, evaluate the effectiveness of the actions you're taking based on your prior understanding of where your brand stands. So this can be done as many times throughout the year as you like, or as just once once a year. The study, when you purchase a study, the model includes a full report, obviously, in a presentation and discussion with us about what we think is happening and what we think can be done. And also there's an optional interactive dashboard that would allow you to further filter and compare results. So you might want to start looking at things in a very granular way and say, okay, you know what, we've got a campaign in the southern states with men 18 to 34. Let's look at how they compare to other people so that we can craft something specific to them. Possible, right? So in terms of what's included, obviously there's everything that's needed for the brand health side of it, because we understand that that's a big part of it as well. So anything that's required in terms of standard metrics for the traditional brand funnels, like awareness, familiarity, usage, trial, conversion, things of that nature. But really the key part is that it does contain our proprietary brand momentum metrics. Again, a brand's vitality. So what are the planned purchases and future intentions? And we'll get into more detail about that very shortly with Tracy. But then there's the brand strength part, which is an analysis of 9 key factors. And this is where all of that validation came in and all of that stress testing came in. Of those 9 factors, things like visibility, value for money, innovation, things that are that drive basically that future purchase intent. And of course, the study also incorporates a number of analyses. One of them is what we call the conversion potential and risk analysis. So you'll see how that can be very helpful in understanding what can and should be done with your brand. So I'll pass it over to Tracy to talk about the model more specifically and in terms of its more granular components.
Great. Thanks, Luke. So in the background, the model itself is actually quite complex, but for the purposes of this presentation, we'll take you through the dimensions that come out of the model. The first 2 being brand strength, which is, does your brand have what it takes to grow? Does it stand out from others in the category? And is it in good health? The second is the more forward-looking measure of brand vitality. And this is really, is the brand currently growing and what's its potential for future growth? Okay. And so if we focus on brand strength a little further, here we're really looking to understand how your brand performs relative to the competitors in the market across these 9 key elements. In other words, is your brand performing better, the same, or worse as the competition? Now, as Luke mentioned, we worked with our team, LEA team, on the advanced analytics of this. And so these key elements were actually established through a multi-year process and developed utilizing multiple sources, including research papers from around the world, specifically on consumer behavior. So they proved to be key indicators of a brand's strengths. They include visibility, which is the extent to which your brand is noticed and available to consumers. Visual appeal, or the attractiveness of your brand's presentation and design. Differentiation, whether you're standing out from others on the market in terms of your offerings, your benefits, your ingredients. Value for the money, or the perception of your brand's price relative to what it offers. The quality or the perception of excellence and reliability of your brand. Whether consumers are engaged, do they have an emotional connection to you? Are they loyal to your brand? Whether you're innovating, introducing new and creative solutions to consumers. Whether the brand is perceived to be have ethical practices and socially responsible, and also that you're meeting the needs of consumers in terms of their demands and expectations. And so we utilize these 9 key elements into one brand strength score by first conducting a key driver analysis for the category. Oh, go back, Luke, sorry. A key driver analysis for the category. And so we weight that based on that key driver analysis. So those items that are more important to purchases in the category are weighted higher than those that are least important. And so this then creates one overall score for each brand in the category. And essentially, this provides us with an overall view of the brand's position in its category and helps us to identify strengths that you can leverage, as well as areas for improvement for your brand. But not only your brand, we look at all of the brands in the category. So you can look at their strengths and their weaknesses to see where you can capitalize. And essentially, this helps you to make proactive decisions to enhance your overall momentum. And then the second measure that comes out of the model is called brand vitality. And here, this is, as we mentioned earlier, is more of a forward-looking measure. So it helps to understand the brand's future health and growth potential. It has 2 main aspects. One is more short-term view, where we look at future purchase behavior among current buyers of your brand. So those who are buying your brand, do they intend to purchase your brand more, the same, or less in the future? But then we also factor in a longer view of future purchase intentions among everybody in the category. And this goes beyond the immediate future and evaluates consumers' intent in the long term and helps predict the ability to maintain the brand's presence and grow over time. So by analyzing these 2 components, we can better understand the likelihood of a brand maintaining or improving its market position. And this helps to offer a clear indication of its potential for sustained success. And so when we look at these 2 measures on a map, we can see it starts to give us a view or a landscape of the category and looking to see where the brands fall. So in this example, we can see that brand A is growing and has strong growth potential, both in terms of brand strength, indicating that it stands out from other brands on those 9 key elements of strength, and also its brand vitality, both in the short term and the long term. Conversely, we see brand D at the bottom is at a high risk of decline. It's not a very strong brand, and its vitality is very limited. In the middle, we have brand B, and we can see brand B really doesn't stand out much from competition on the key elements of strength, but it probably fares mediocre. Same thing with its vitality. So there's things that it can do in both the short term and the long term to improve its momentum. And then we have the 2 outliers, brand E, which has a moderate brand strength score, but a strong vitality, indicating it may be an emerging brand, and it has to communicate its strengths a little more. And then finally, we have brand C, which is very strong in terms of the components of strength, but its vitality is limited, indicating that it may be a brand that's more mature and needs to innovate to attract more consumers. And so we take these 2 scores, the brand strength and the brand vitality, and we combine them into one momentum score. And this score can be negative or positive, and it gives us an overall view of the brands in the category and their growth potential. Okay. And so we can take the overall momentum score and then take it a step further by combining it with current reach and categorizing the brands a little further to help us segment out the category. So if we first break the momentum score into those with a high index versus those with a weaker index, and then look within it, we can see that those that have a broader reach within the category currently and a high index would be considered brands that are growing. Whereas brands that have a high index, momentum index, but maybe a limited reach currently are those that are emerging or potentially a niche brand. Looking at the weaker momentum index brands, those that have a strong reach currently would be your more mature brands. So they're strong within the users that they're capturing, but there's really not a lot of potential for them to grow. And then finally, we have those that have a weaker index, but again, a limited reach and are at risk at decline because they don't have a good current user base, but also the remaining users does not have an affinity towards those brands. Okay, and so far, all of the measures we took you through, the brand strength, the brand vitality, and the overall momentum score really helps to give us a good view of the category itself and where the brands sit within those categories. And again, we can help you to give you decisions on where you need to refine and help to grow your brand. But we also can look at the momentum index within each of the brands. And here, this allows us to give you a conversion potential and risk analysis. So again, within each brand, we can determine what proportion of category users are engaged purchasers, or those that are currently purchasing your brand and really have an affinity towards your brand. So there's where you want to build your loyalty. Meanwhile, you can have current purchasers who do not give your brand a strong momentum score. And so those are at risk. So there you might want to innovate or refocus your communication. And then on the other side, we have people who are not currently purchasing you, but actually have a high affinity towards your brand. So in other words, those are your untapped potentials. And so you want to target that group of people. And then we also have unavailable non-purchasers. These are people who are not purchasing your brand, but also those who are not currently have a strong connection to your brand. So depending on the size of that group in your brand, you may decide that you want to innovate to bring them into your brand or abandon them altogether. And what we'll do is we'll actually give you a profile of these groups within your brand to help you to target them and bring them into your brand.
Thank you, Tracy. That was great.
Sure.
So what we wanted to do with the model was bring it to life by looking at brands that we all know, or that many of us will know, in two categories. As I mentioned, in the laundry detergent category, which is the one I will be going through in the next few minutes, and then we'll get to a dog food and treats category with Tracy a little bit later on. So of course, being researchers, we conducted a survey among 1,500 US adults from Leger's Leo panel, which means that this allowed us to have each brand evaluated by approximately 600 people. Obviously, it depends on the number of brands that are included in the survey, which is important to consider when looking at sample sizes. But in this case, the qualifying criterion was that the respondents must have purchased a laundry detergent within the last 3 months, which it should be a lot of people. The survey took place between August 10th and 10th to 17th, 2024, and geographically representative across the US. So what we do here is we ensure that we have a robust and relevant data set for evaluating brand momentum within this category. Now, as this was a case study, we looked at a whole bunch of brands and decided on 10. We could have done more, we could have done less, but we felt this mix of brands would give us a good idea of that. If you remember that chart that Tracy showed of the two axes and where brands may cluster in terms of the vitality and strength, we picked brands that we felt would show that spread, and you'll see that it really does. So we've picked some legacy brands, or what we felt were less legacy brands, some new emerging brands, a whole mix. Now, of course, we conduct a category-specific key driver analysis. So what are the key drivers to anticipated purchase. You can imagine that these will be different depending on your category. So we'll see in the dog food category that it is quite different. But for this particular one, we're looking at things like meeting your needs, being engaging, and value for money being the top three. So of course, most critical, does it actually perform what you need it to perform, getting your clothes clean? But there's also a component of, when we say engaging, we're talking about that emotional connection or engaging with the brand. And of course, value for money. This is probably one of those categories where people are a little bit less loyal and loyalties might shift a little bit based on sales, promotions, things of that nature. So it's a top concern. If you look at the bottom ones, visual appeal and being visible as a brand are not that important. Quality of the product, I would say, is sort of like clumped in with the middle part of being innovative, responsible, and different. So um, what is really important, I think, is to be looking at the top three, or at least looking at the ranking of these as we continue to move through the report. So the scores were calculated, the scores for brand vitality and for brand strength, and they were mapped as we said we would do. So what we're seeing here basically is we're seeing two brands that have this, what we believe to be the strongest growth potential for a bunch of different reasons. Depending on the brand. So we've got Tide and Molly Suds. So they're both have strong connection with consumers, with their consumers. So they're well positioned for success. It obviously will get to the reach and awareness part on the next slide, but that'll be important to consider when you think about, relative to each other. Obviously, Tide is going to have a much higher reach than Molly Suds. Not obviously, but we know from from the data. And then you've got a bunch in the middle, the Ecos, Gain, Mrs. Meyer's, 9 Elements, kind of have, pretty good performance, but they all have, room for improvement, let's say, in order to maximize on their growth potential. And then you've got others that are falling into the high risk of decline, in particular, All and Persil. So this chart really gives you a good sort of bird's eye view of which brands are well positioned for growth and which may need to, are you one of those brands that needs to focus on revitalizing your strategies to avoid stagnation? So this will give you sort of like that starting point of like, where am I? And then the following slides are going to be like, hey, well, what do you do to get to that strong growth potential quadrant? As I mentioned on the previous slide, it's good to have that view, that overall view, but even more importantly is to look at the brand's momentum score. So as we had mentioned, I'm going to go back one slide, the brand strength and brand vitality scores are combined to create the brand momentum score. So Tide has a brand momentum score of 31, and their reach is 65%. So that's people who are aware. So it's awareness times the proportion of buyers. So we're looking at sort of people who are engaged with the brand. High reach, high momentum score, which means people are Tide is performing well on many of those nine key drivers. And people are saying, yep, I'm going to buy it in the future, and I'm going to buy it more in the future. So you've got this sort of perfect storm to help us basically say that Tide is still a growing brand, even though it's been around for a long time. So clearly there's a lot of innovation happening, a lot of new products, promotions, whatever it may be. And we see that Molly Suds, that has a brand momentum score of 29. So again, quite doing quite well on many of the 9 key drivers, and in terms of the brand's vitality, but with a low reach. Again, there's a lot more potential for growth there, but also a lot more effort to get to that growing quadrant. Gain is also a growing category with a reach of 42% and a momentum of 17. Now, you look at some of the brands and you closer to the bottom, we'll focus on Persil because we talk about that one a bit later. That one and 7th generation are at risk for a couple of reasons: lower reach and overall lower momentum scores. So not connecting too well on these things, which puts them at risk unless they basically reinvigorate their brand strategies. So one of the views that we really like is to look at the brand strength summary. So we've talked about sort of big picture, and then combining the reach with the momentum score to categorize into growing, niche, and emerging, or at risk. But here's where we start to understand why. So we talked about Tide being the top performer. Well, this is where we see that they are performing, outperforming the competition on those little green dots on 8 of the 9 key drivers. So this is why. Gain is mostly in line with the competition, and excels in visibility and quality. But keep in mind that those two things, in relation to the key driver, are kind of less important. So wouldn't help drive the scores too high. And if we look at Persil, as I've already mentioned, they are sort of very much at risk for not connecting with the consumer on all of these things. So it's important to keep that in mind. Molly's Suds does really well, as I've said, on many things. So that would be a brand emerging, obviously, but the one that you would be looking out for the most, or the one that you would want to sort of keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in terms of their innovation, their distribution, so on and so forth. Another view that's important here is where we talk about the brand vitality summary. So the brand vitality, again, is sort of that short-term, long-term view of where people are going to go with their purchase dollars. So Tide and Gain, which were both classified as growing brands, if we read this correctly, we see that they're going to they should be seeing a steady or increased purchase in the future, because they're outperforming their competition on general likelihood to purchase in the future. And then we sort of dig a little bit deeper and say, well, are you going to be buying more, less, or the same? And they tend to go, they tend to perform in line with the competition for people who say they're going to buy more or the same that they're currently buying. Molly's Suds, as we talked about earlier, does show potential, but the outlook for future purchase is a little bit mixed. It does perform in line with the competition, but really doesn't outperform. I mean, it's more, yeah. But again, it's important to keep in mind always the reach of a brand when you think about these things, right? I said we would focus a little bit on Persil because that was one of the brands that was at risk. We saw that it underperforms on all the key drivers, but it's also important to look at these things again in relation to the rest of the category. So the arrows here indicate the range of scores on each. So for quality, for example, for quality, like we'll see that Persil, compared to other factors, does well on this, but it's really not performing in the context of the overall category. So you have to think about that. Think about the shelf at a store, right? People are not going to see just Persil and go, oh yeah, it's a quality product. They're comparing it to other brands. So even though they're doing a bit better in relation to their other factors, overall in the category, they're not doing well at all. In fact, they're at the bottom of the list. So this is again, a really good view to understand sort of what's happening to the brand. What do we need to focus on? And again, keeping in mind that importance axis at the bottom there, that arrow, knowing that Persil right now doesn't meet needs according to consumers, but that's the most important thing. So a lot of work would have to be done there in terms of making it an engaging brand as well, and value for money. All of them, really. I could go on and on, but I won't. But let's look at the real quickly before we get to our other case study. Let's look at the conversion potential and risk analysis. So this is among buyers who purchased in the last 12 months in the category who are aware of the brand. And for me, I don't know, Tracy, about you, but this is really the most impactful part of the report. Other people feel differently. It's a really good view of these 4 different groups that we've created. So we've, just as a reminder, we've created sort of engaged buyers. So these are your most loyal customers who love your brand and regularly buy and return. We've got the at risk, so the engaged, and then we've got sort of, I guess, the at risk buyers. So the customers who are starting to lose interest, but with the right attention, you could win them back or get them to come on board. And then we have basically what we call available non-buyers. So these are people who aren't interested and just need a little push to become loyal customers, and then unavailable. So people who not engaged, and just not there yet. So if we think about this in terms of Purcell, for example, so we're seeing here that we've got 61% of the people we spoke to here who are not engaged, non-users. So they've never tried the brand. They're aware of it, but they're not really engaging with the brand, and they're not planning on purchasing it. So that not really a group that you want to be too concerned with unless you have a complete brand strategy revamp, that you want to work on there. But the highest, I guess, the highest potential group, I would say, is the engaged non-user. So these are people who has a very positive view of the brand. They just haven't made that leap yet. So converting those people should be easy and should be the priority, in my opinion. But again, when we look at this brand and look at the non-engaged non-users, that's a huge risk for decline for that brand. You look at a brand like Tide, where 59% of buyers are engaged users. So that's strong, loyal consumer base. Again, as Tracy said earlier, with those, it's all about maintaining and building that loyalty. But then you've got that room for growth with non-engaged, with engaged non-users. So you've got 12% of people here saying that there's a potential for conversion. So they like the brand, they think you do well on many of those key driver things. It's just never have not purchased your brand. So yeah, this is a very good view. I won't go through the whole thing. I did tell you at the beginning of the webinar that you would be getting a copy of this, so you can sort of read through. Just go through really quickly one additional thing that we include in our report and our dashboard, and that's brand sentiment for the brands that you'd be selecting. So if we think about Purcell, we're kind of seeing a mix here between, so these are category buyers familiar with the brand. A lot of, not a ton of negative comments, but again, that's because of very low engagement with this brand. So we're looking at people who are 36% provide positive comments outlining its ability to clean tough stains, and it has a great scent. But then we've got a huge chunk in the neutral group, so people who just don't really care. They do say that it works well. Some of the comments we're seeing is that it works well, but that it doesn't really stand out to some of its competitors like Gain or Tide. So this is a really good view of the verbatims that we collect. There is an AI-driven sort of thematic coding that happens to create the sentiment scores. And this is where you really get to see where those area, I know I need to improve. How do I do that, right? Because people are going to talk about those specific things that they are looking for that they're not getting, or even they're going to compare themselves. They're going to compare your brand to other brands. We saw from some of the comments about Tide and Gain. So that's a really good insight, saying, yeah, your product works well, but doesn't stand out compared to your competitors. So what does that mean? Well, it requires a bit more digging into the data, which we provide in the form of a dashboard. I could go on, but Tracy is looking very eager to talk about dog food and dog treats. So I'll pass it over to Tracy.
Yes, thank you, Luke. Okay, so for our second case study, as Luke mentioned, we conducted a study among 1,000 dog owners. Each brand that we evaluated was evaluated by approximately 150 respondents who were sufficiently familiar with that brand. And to qualify, they had to purchase at least one product in the last 3 months within the category. We conducted this in July across the US. And so in terms of the brands we included 15 brands in this study. And as we did with the laundry detergent, we wanted to have a good representation of the various brands. So here we include some legacy brands, including Purina and Iams, but also the newer brands of Just Food for Dogs, Honest Kitchen, and the Farmer's Dog. So as we get into the results, we'll see how these brands differ in the category. And so again, the first step we do is we run a key drivers analysis of those 9 elements of brand strength. And within this category, we see it's a little bit different than we saw in laundry detergent, where value for the money is really the top driver in this category, followed closely by having a connection with the brand or it being engaging, it being different or unique, and it meeting the needs of consumers. Of least importance is that it's visually appealing, which is not surprising for this category. We go to the next slide. Here, we plot, again, the 2 main dimensions of brand momentum, brand strength and brand vitality. And the results are pretty interesting for this category. We see Purina really stands out in terms of its growth potential being very strong. And that's followed closely by the newer brands of Just Food for Dogs and Honest Kitchen. But what's interesting is we do see the Farmer's Dog has a very strong brand strength score, but not a high vitality score, indicating that it has more of a niche appeal to it. But then also we have all the way at the bottom, which with a negative vitality score, IAMS. So here we really see that a well-established brand is really standing out as not having a strong brand strength or vitality, which is a little surprising, but helps us give a good landscape of this category. And then we have just brands sort of in the middle, Wellness, Merrick, Stella and Chewy's, where they have a moderate strength score and a moderate vitality. So definitely brands where actions can be taken to help improve their overall momentum. So if we look now at the overall momentum score, again, combined with that current reach, we start to then categorize the brands a little bit further. So again, that strong Purina has a very broad reach in the category and the highest momentum score, leading it to be classified as a growing brand. Another growing brand would be Blue Buffalo, which has another strong reach score and also a strong momentum. And then again, we have a number of emerging brands. These are brands that have a strong momentum score, but their reach is limited at the moment. And that includes a lot of the newer brands that are perhaps offering more human grade or more customizable solutions for pet parents, including Just Food for Dogs and Honest Kitchen, followed by Fresh Pet and the Farmer's Dog. If we look towards the bottom, we do have what we saw in the laundry category as well, some mature brands, which are Hill's Science Diet and IAMS, again, with that low index score and moderate reach level. So it really helps us to have a good view of the category and where all the brands sit. And like we did in laundry, we're actually going to focus on the Honest Kitchen for this analysis within this case study. So seeing Honest Kitchen falling as an emerging brand, we want to look a little bit deeper into that brand. So looking at the brand strength summary, again, categorizing the brands within the category, we see that the growing brands really stand out from the others in the category on those more important dimensions of value, being engaging, being different. While the emerging brands are either outperforming or moderate, they're really not visible. So it's outlining or highlighting areas where those emerging brands could really improve, particularly the Honest Kitchen. It does fairly well on being different and innovative, but it really can improve perceptions of its value and maybe have a stronger connection with consumers than it currently does. And then on the opposite side of the category, we see those that are at risk. And these brands really fall short of the competition across most of the key dimensions of brand strength. So again, this summary just helps to highlight where your brand needs to improve, how it compares to competition, and helps you to be more proactive on what you can do to improve your momentum. If we then look at the brand vitality summary, we can see that, again, those growing brands, as we saw in the laundry category, are really built for success in the long term. They're most likely to be purchased in the future. But the emerging brands are where we see the growth potential is really in the short term on those among current buyers likely to buy them more. So there really does still need to be action among those emerging brands to ensure their long-term growth, not just that short-term growth. Okay. And again, focusing in on the Honest Kitchen, as Luke mentioned before, the vertical lines here indicate the range of scores in the category, and then where Honest Kitchen falls on those range of scores. So here, actually, in this category, quality is least differentiated across the brands. So it's a more tighter range of scores there, as opposed to value for the money, which has a much broader range of scores. But focusing in on where Honest Kitchen does well, it really stands out in terms of its quality falling at the top, as well as being innovative and responsible. Where it doesn't do so well is actually that visibility falling towards the bottom, but also can improve perceptions of its value, and again, that connection with consumers, which are the top drivers within this category. And then looking at the conversion potential and risk analysis for the Honest Kitchen, which again is an emerging brand, we see that a small proportion are engaged users, but interestingly, they do not have any non-engaged users. So the users that they were able to bring into the brand are highly engaged with them and loyal. So really the next target to look at are those engaged non-users. So the 52% is really the next group to target, because they're engaged with your brand. They have a high affinity towards your brand. They're just not using you. So here's where we would provide you with a profile of these users to help target them and bring them into your brand. Similarly, what we saw with Tide, Purina really has a strong base of engaged users, but also still has about 20% potential to grow with those engaged non-users. And then again, those mature and at-risk brands, we really see the largest proportion fall into those non-engaged non-users. So they have a lot more work to do in order to build and grow their momentum. Okay, and again, looking at the brand sentiment now for Honest Kitchen, we can see that a lot of the findings here we're seeing among the verbatims really tie back to some of those brand strength scores. So overall, a very positive view of the Honest Kitchen. The consumers appreciate the high quality, which we saw, in those brand strength scores. They have premium products, healthy ingredients, and they're trustworthy. But and some actually do highlight, the fact that it's human grade pet food, which stands out and probably links back to its quality ratings. However, they are seen as expensive and lacks visibility, which again, we saw in those brand strength scores. So there's limited availability and minimal advertising. So improving those the visibility and the perceived value by tying back that, yes, they're paying more, but it's for human grade food and high quality, will help build the momentum there for the brand. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, so we've come to the end of our webinar. We have a number of questions that we'll get to, but I just wanted to end on this slide, which is basically just a recap. I'm not going to read through it. It's what we've been saying. If there were one slide, if you were to print this deck, please don't. But if you were to print it, this is the slide I would put right on top to remind you what the study is all about and its power and its usefulness for brands. So I'm going to open up
Yeah.
the floor to questions. If there are any questions we don't get to, I can see a number in the Q&A that we'll get to. Please don't hesitate to email solutions@leger360.com, either to get additional details about the study or to ask the questions that you did not get answers to today. So one of the questions oh, sorry, Tracy, did you want to say something?
No, just that we're excited to work with anyone on their brand momentum for their category.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true. Actually, I do have a question. Maybe you can help me answer, Tracy, which is,
absolutely.
in terms of the number of brands, what's the ideal, maybe the maximum number of brands? It really depends on the sample size, right?
It does. So the number of brands would drive the sample size.
Yeah.
So I think typically we would probably have, depending on the category, if it's large category, 15 to 20 as the max. But again, that would drive your category, would drive your sample size that you need.
Right,
So
which then impacts, because you want to have a robust sample per brand in order to make that
yes,
good comparison, right?
yes.
Another question we have is, how often should this analysis be performed to measure changes in strength and vitality? That's a really good question. I would say, and Tracy, jump in,
Mhm.
that there's a number of factors involved here. I think one of the ones that you have to consider first and foremost is, are you in a category that is itself dynamic? So how aggressive are your competitors? What's happening? Do things happen quickly? If we think about a category like the beauty space, where that's super versus paper products like paper
Mhm.
towels,
Mhm.
the frequency might be different because the actions that your competitors are taking are going to be less again, less aggressive, less visible, and so once a
Yeah.
year is probably the minimum. But if you operate in a category that's highly dynamic, it could be as much as 4 times a year, because you want to see the effect of what your competitors are doing and the effect that it's having on your brand's perception and your competitors as well.
Agreed. Especially if you're innovating very frequently, you want to make
Right.
sure that that innovation is positively impacting your brand. So you're going to want to measure more frequently for sure.
Yeah. Can a local brand participate in this study? I would say yes.
Yes.
That's why we talked about it, this study being customizable.
Mhm.
We rethink the sampling plan and the targeting plan and the competitor list with our client, and deploy and do the same kind of
Absolutely.
analysis. Yeah. So what are the
Here.
advantages of this compared to a brand equity study?
So, well, in my opinion, it goes beyond a brand equity score because we give you both the brand strength and vitality. So it's really also more forward looking. So the brand strength is akin to your brand equity, but now we're overlaying that brand vitality score, which is more forward looking. And it allows you to make better proactive decisions as opposed to reactive decisions.
Yeah, I would agree. We don't see any. Some of the questions were doubled up.
Yeah, I think I think you covered all.
Oh, okay, good, perfect.
Yes.
So voila,
Perfect.
as we say in Canada. We're all done. We'll give you all 10 minutes back of your afternoon. We're really looking forward to talking to as many of you as possible about what can be done with this study for your brand and your category.